The North African sun beat down mercilessly on the German repair depot. Sand covered everything like a brown blanket. Oberstfreiter Klaus Hoffmann stood outside his tent, watching a cloud of dust approach from the east. Behind that dust cloud, something was being towed. Something American. Klaus was 34 years old and had been fixing military vehicles since before the war started. He took pride in German engineering. Every bolt had its place. Every wire followed perfect diagrams. German machines were the best in the world, or so he believed. The dust settled. Two German soldiers jumped from their truck, unhooking a small, battered vehicle from the tow chain. It was an American Jeep. Klaus had heard about these machines, but never seen one up close. It looked tiny, pathetic even. The body was flat and simple. No curves, no style, just metal panels bolted together like a child's toy. "This is what we captured?" Klaus asked, walking around the Jeep. Bullet holes decorated the hood. One tire was flat. The windshield had a crack running across it like a lightning bolt. "Found it abandoned near El Alamein," one soldier explained. "The Americans ran when we attacked their supply column. Left this behind." Klaus's assistant, Werner, stepped out from the repair tent. He was 28, shorter than Klaus, with grease permanently stained under his fingernails. Werner whistled low when he saw the Jeep. "Command wants us to study it." Werner asked. "Before we scrap it," Klaus confirmed. "They want to know what the Americans are using." Young Franz appeared next. He was only 19, fresh from training in Stuttgart. His uniform still looked new. His hands were still soft. War had not yet hardened him. Franz circled the Jeep like it was a museum piece. "It looks so simple," Franz said, touching the flat hood. "Simple means inferior," Klaus replied. "German vehicles are complex because we engineer them properly. This American machine probably breaks down constantly." The fourth member of their team arrived carrying a toolbox. Otto was 42 years old. Gray streaked his hair. He had fixed vehicles in the First World War, back when trucks were new inventions. Otto said little, but noticed everything. He set his toolbox down and stared at the Jeep without speaking. "What do you think, Otto?" Werner asked. Otto walked slowly around the vehicle. He bent down to examine the chassis. He touched the engine hood. He looked at the tires. Finally, he stood up and wiped his hands on his pants. "It still runs," Otto said quietly. "Look at the bullet holes. Look at the damage. But I bet it still runs." Klaus laughed. "German vehicles can take damage too. Our Panzer tanks, not the same." Otto interrupted. "This is a light vehicle. Thin metal. But something tells me it will start." Werner found the key still in the ignition. The soldiers who captured it had not bothered to remove it. Werner turned the key. The engine coughed once, twice. Then it roared to life. Black smoke puffed from the exhaust, but the engine ran smooth and steady. Klaus frowned. He expected the engine to be damaged. He expected it to barely function. But this American Jeep sounded healthy despite its wounds. "Shut it off," Klaus ordered. "We need to take it apart. Every piece. Every bolt. Command wants a full report on American vehicle technology." The four mechanics pushed the Jeep into their tent. Inside, away from the brutal sun, they began their examination. Franz brought their German technical manuals for comparison. Werner gathered tools. Otto simply stared at the Jeep, his experienced eyes seeing things the others missed. "Where do we start?" Franz asked eagerly. Klaus opened the hood. The engine sat there, visible and accessible. No complicated covers. No special panels. Just an engine anyone could see and reach. "The engine layout is crude," Klaus said. "Look how exposed everything is. German engines are protected better, but easier to repair," Werner observed. "You can reach everything without removing other parts first." They spent the next hour examining the Jeep without touching any tools. Klaus pointed out every flaw he could find. The body was too thin. The seats were uncomfortable. The dashboard was too simple. Werner and Franz listened, taking notes. Otto remained silent as the sun began to set. Painting the desert orange and purple, Franz made a discovery. He was looking at the bolts holding the body panels in place. He grabbed a standard wrench from their toolkit. The wrench fit perfectly. "Klaus," Franz called out. "These bolts are standard size." "So," Klaus replied. "So are these," Franz continued, moving to another part of the Jeep. "And these. And these." Werner joined Franz, checking different areas of the vehicle. The fenders, the hood, the seats, the doors. Everywhere they looked, they found standard bolts, standard nuts, standard screws. Our cubal wagon needs 17 different wrench sizes, Werner said slowly, and special tools for some parts. This Jeep uses maybe 3 sizes for everything. Klaus wanted to dismiss this. Simple fasteners meant lazy engineering. But something nagged at his mind. He thought about working on German vehicles in the field. How many times had they needed special tools they did not have? How many times had repairs taken hours because they needed to remove 5 parts to reach one broken piece? Otto finally spoke again. I have worked on 50 different German vehicles. Each one needs special tools, special knowledge, special training. He placed his hand on the Jeep's hood. This one only needs this. He held up a single wrench. Night fell over North Africa. British artillery rumbled in the distance. The war continued around them. But inside the repair tent, 4 German mechanics stared at an American Jeep, and Klaus felt the first small crack in his certainty. Tomorrow, they would take it apart completely. Tomorrow, they would understand how the Americans built their machines. Tomorrow, Klaus believed, they would confirm German superiority. He had no idea how wrong he was. 3 days had passed since the Jeep arrived at their depot. Now it lay completely disassembled on the workshop floor. Hundreds of parts spread across the concrete in careful rows. Klaus stood over this mechanical puzzle, his notebook in hand, and felt deeply confused. The morning had started with confidence. Klaus assigned each man a section of the vehicle. Werner took the engine. Franz worked on the body and chassis. Otto examined the transmission and drivetrain. Klaus supervised everything, expecting to find proof of American shortcuts and poor quality. Instead, they found something else entirely. How many parts total? Klaus asked, completing his count for the 3rd time. Werner consulted his list. About 30,000 parts. Maybe less. Klaus shook his head. That cannot be right. Our cubal wagon has over 50,000 parts. Our half-track has 70,000. How does this American vehicle function with so few components? Because each part does more, Otto said from the floor. He was examining the transfer case that powered all 4 wheels. German design uses specialized parts. 1 job per part. This uses simple parts that work together. Fewer pieces. Same result. Franz was studying the body panels, which lay stacked against the tent wall. He picked up a fender, then a door panel, then a section of the hood. Each piece was flat metal, stamped into shape. No complex curves. No difficult welds. Just simple bends and straight lines. Klaus, look at this, Franz said, holding a dented fender. I dropped this yesterday. From shoulder height. It dented but did not crack. Did not break. Soft metal, Klaus said dismissively. Weak. Tough, Werner corrected. Not the same as weak. Hard metal cracks under impact. This metal bends. Absorbs the hit. Then you can hammer it back into shape. Klaus wrote this down but refused to call it an advantage. German vehicles used proper hardened steel. Strong steel. Steel that did not bend. That was quality engineering. Or was it? Werner had the engine completely disassembled on a separate workbench. The 4-cylinder engine looked simple to the point of crudeness. No advanced fuel injection. No sophisticated timing mechanisms. Just basic components bolted together with generous spacing between parts. The tolerances are huge, Werner said, measuring gaps with calipers. Look at this piston clearance. German engines have precise tolerances. Tight fits. This engine has gaps you could almost see. Proof of poor manufacturing, Klaus declared. Or proof of smart design, Werner replied quietly. Think about where this vehicle operates. Desert sand. African mud. Russian snow. Tight tolerances mean dirt gets in and seizes the engine. These large tolerances mean the engine keeps running even when dirty. Klaus wanted to argue, but he remembered their cubal wagon breaking down 3 times last month. Twice because sand contaminated the fuel system. Once because mud packed around the precisely fitted steering components. They had needed 6 hours each time to clean and repair the vehicle. How long would this American engine take to clean? Otto interrupted his thoughts. Come look at this electrical system. The 4 men gathered around the Jeep's wiring harness, which Otto had laid out on a cloth. German vehicles had complex electrical systems. Multiple fuses, dozens of wire colors, detailed diagrams needed for any repair. The Jeep's system looked almost childish in comparison. Franz could learn this entire system in 1 afternoon, Otto said. Maybe less. 3 main circuits. Simple switches. Basic connections. Nothing complicated. Franz picked up the wiring diagram they had found in the Jeep. It was a single page. Their Kubelwagen wiring diagram was a book with 43 pages. This cannot be safe, Klaus insisted. What if something breaks? Then anyone can fix it, Werner replied. That is the point. German systems need trained mechanics. This needs a soldier with basic tools. The realization was beginning to dawn on Klaus, though he fought against it. The Americans had not built a precision machine. They had built a soldier's machine, something any common infantryman could repair in the field with basic knowledge. German vehicles needed specialists. American vehicles needed only willing hands. The afternoon brought more discoveries. Werner tested the metallurgy of various parts using their field equipment. The steel was not the highest grade. The aluminum was not the purest. But everything was consistent. Every bolt had the same strength. Every panel had the same thickness. Mass production at massive scale, Werner explained. When you build hundreds of thousands of vehicles, consistency matters more than absolute quality. Klaus counted the fasteners. Every bolt, nut, and screw in the entire Jeep used one of only 3 sizes. 3 sizes. Their German vehicles used dozens of different fasteners. How many times had they lacked the right wrench in the field? How many times had they improvised or delayed repairs because they needed special tools? Evening came. The depot received reports from the front lines. American forces were pushing west. More jeeps appeared everywhere. They carried supplies. They transported wounded soldiers. They scouted enemy positions. They mounted machine guns and charged into battle. The reports said these little vehicles went places German vehicles could not go. A wounded German soldier visited their tent. He had been recuperating at the depot's medical station. He saw the disassembled Jeep and laughed bitterly. You are studying it, he asked Klaus. Yes. Command wants to know about American vehicle technology. The soldier limped closer, looking at the parts spread across the floor. I watched these machines in Tunisia. They drove through sand that trapped our trucks. They climbed rocks that stopped our motorcycles. 3 of them pulled one of our half-tracks from a ditch when our recovery vehicle broke down. How is that possible? Franz asked. They are so small. 4-wheel drive, the soldier explained. All 4 wheels pull. Our vehicles only push from the back. And they are light. When ours sink, there's float on top. After the soldier left, the 4 mechanics stood silently around the disassembled Jeep. Outside, the desert night brought cold air and distant gunfire. Inside the tent, surrounded by American engineering, Klaus felt his certainty crumbling like sand. We need to put it back together, Klaus said finally. Command wants field tests. Us against them. Jeep against Kubelwagen. Werner nodded slowly. When do we start? Tomorrow morning, Klaus replied. We prove German engineering is still superior. But as he said those words, Klaus no longer believed them. Klaus gripped the steering wheel of the reassembled Jeep. Werner sat beside him, holding a clipboard with their test schedule. Behind them, 50 meters back, Franz and Otto followed in their best Kubelwagen. The morning sun had just cleared the horizon, painting the desert gold and crimson. Radio check, Werner called into the handset. We hear you. Franz's voice crackled back. Ready when you are. Their commanding officer had approved the field tests. Headquarters wanted data about American vehicle capabilities. Klaus had designed a comprehensive course. Flat desert for speed. Sand dunes for traction. Rocky wadis for durability. Steep inclines for power. Everything needed to prove German engineering superiority. The proving ground lay 50 kilometers from their depot. Empty desert that had seen tank battles months earlier. Shell craters dotted the landscape like pockmarks. Destroyed vehicles rusted in the sand. War had passed through here and left its scars. First test, Klaus announced over the radio. Speed trial across flat hardpan. 3 kilometers. On my mark, Klaus pressed the accelerator. The Jeep lurched forward. Behind them, the Kubelwagen matched their acceleration. Both vehicles raced across the hard desert floor. Klaus pushed the Jeep faster. 60 kilometers per hour. 70. The wind roared past the open sides. Sand stung his face. The Kubelwagen kept pace. Franz was driving well. At the 3-kilometer mark, both vehicles arrived within seconds of each other. Even, Werner recorded on his clipboard. No advantage either way. Klaus nodded. At least the Jeep was not faster. That was something. Next test. Sand dunes ahead. The landscape changed. Soft sand rose in waves and ridges. Wind had sculpted the dunes into flowing shapes that looked solid but would swallow vehicles like quicksand. Klaus had chosen 3 large dunes to climb, each one steeper than the last. Klaus shifted the Jeep into 4-wheel drive. He felt all 4 wheels engage. Power flowed to every tire. He aimed at the first dune and accelerated. The Jeep climbed. Sand sprayed behind them. The engine whined but did not falter. Werner grabbed the dashboard as they crested the top at a sharp angle. Gravity pulled them down the far side. Klaus controlled the descent and prepared for the second dune. Behind them, the Kübelwagen attempted the same climb. Klaus watched in his mirror. The German vehicle had rear-wheel drive only. The front wheels did nothing. The rear tires dug into the sand, spinning, searching for traction. The Kübelwagen made it halfway up before sliding backward. Franz tried 3 more times. Each attempt ended the same way. The rear wheels dug trenches. The front wheels could not help. Finally, Franz gave up and drove around the dune instead. Advantage Jeep, Werner wrote. 4-wheel drive superior in soft sand. Klaus said nothing. One test proved nothing. The next test would be different. The second dune was steeper. Klaus felt doubt as he approached. The Jeep was small, light. Could it really climb this? He pressed the accelerator and attacked the slope. The 4 wheels clawed at the sand. The engine screamed. The whole vehicle shook. But it climbed, meter by meter, fighting for every centimeter. Klaus felt the back end sliding sideways. He corrected. The Jeep found purchase and surged over the top. Werner was laughing. Actually laughing. This little machine is incredible. The Kübelwagen did not even attempt the second dune. Franz radioed that it was too steep for rear-wheel drive. The third dune was the steepest yet. Klaus hesitated. If the Jeep failed here, at least he could say they found its limit. He lined up the approach and committed. The ascent was brutal. Sand avalanched around them. The engine temperature gauge climbed into the red zone. Werner gripped his seat with white knuckles. Klaus thought they would fail. The Jeep thought differently. It clawed its way to the summit and stopped there, engine gasping but victorious. From the top, they could see the next test area. A rocky wadi cut through the desert like a scar. Sharp stones littered the bottom. This terrain would favor ground clearance and durability. Klaus descended the dune carefully and drove toward the rocks. The Kübelwagen rejoined them, having gone around all 3 dunes. Franz looked frustrated when he climbed out for the briefing. The sand tests are not fair, Franz complained. Our vehicle was not designed for desert warfare. Neither was the Jeep, Otto replied quietly. But it works anyway. The rocky wadi tested both vehicles harshly. Klaus drove the Jeep slowly, picking his way between boulders. The high ground clearance kept the chassis above most obstacles. When the undercarriage did scrape rock, nothing broke. The Jeep bounced and rattled but continued forward. The Kübelwagen followed. Lower to the ground. Less clearance. Twice the chassis struck rocks hard enough to stop the vehicle. The second impact made a terrible grinding sound. Franz radioed that they had damaged the oil pan. We need to stop, Franz called. We are losing oil. Klaus halted the Jeep. They gathered around the Kübelwagen. Oil dripped from a crack in the pan. Otto crawled underneath with a welding kit. The repair took 40 minutes. 40 minutes when the vehicle was completely disabled. Test this, Werner said, pointing at the Jeep. Damage the oil pan. See how fast we can fix it. Klaus did not want to damage the Jeep intentionally. But the test required honesty. He found a sharp rock and deliberately scraped the Jeep's oil pan across it. The metal dented but did not crack. He tried harder. Finally, on the third attempt, he managed to punch a small hole. Werner removed the damaged pan. 22 bolts. All the same size. 1 wrench needed. 8 minutes to remove. They welded the hole shut. 7 minutes. Reinstalled the pan. 9 minutes. Total repair time. 24 minutes. The Kübelwagen had taken 40 minutes just to weld the crack. It would have taken another 30 to remove and replace the pan properly. The final test was scheduled for late afternoon. Pull a stuck supply truck from soft sand. Test of raw pulling power. The supply truck had actually gotten stuck while attempting to deliver fuel that morning. Perfect timing. The Jeep went first. Klaus backed up to the truck and hooked the tow chain. He engaged 4-wheel drive and pulled. The Jeep's wheels bit into the sand. The truck resisted. Klaus added more throttle. The rear of the Jeep squatted down as power transferred to all 4 wheels. The truck moved, slowly at first, then faster. After 30 seconds, the truck was free. The Kubelwagen attempted the same rescue. Franz backed into position. He pulled. The rear wheels spun uselessly. The truck did not move. The Kubelwagen simply dug itself deeper into the sand. After 5 minutes, Franz gave up. That evening, as they drove back to the depot, Klaus barely spoke. Every test had shown the same truth. The simple American Jeep outperformed their sophisticated German vehicle in almost every category. Not because of better parts, but because of better thinking. They were 3 kilometers from safety when British artillery opened fire. The first shell exploded 200 meters to their left. Sand and smoke erupted into the air. Klaus jerked the steering wheel instinctively. Werner grabbed the dashboard. Behind them, Franz swerved the Kubelwagen wildly. British artillery, Werner shouted over the engine noise. They found our position. Another shell screamed overhead. This one landed closer. Close enough that Klaus felt the shock wave push against the Jeep. His ears rang. His hands trembled on the steering wheel. "We need to get out of here." Franz's voice crackled over the radio, high with fear. Back to the depot. Klaus looked at the terrain ahead. Rough ground, rocky patches, soft sand. 3 kilometers of dangerous driving. The Kubelwagen would struggle. He knew it. They all knew it. He made his decision in 2 seconds. "Abandon the Kubelwagen," Klaus ordered into the radio. "All of you get in the Jeep. Now." "But Klaus," Franz started to protest. "That is an order." The Kubelwagen skidded to a stop beside the Jeep. Franz and Otto jumped out, grabbing only their rifles and water canteens. They threw themselves into the back of the Jeep. No time for careful boarding. Just desperate survival. Klaus punched the accelerator before Otto was fully seated. The Jeep leaped forward. For men. For rifles. One American vehicle. Running for their lives while British shells rained down around them. The Jeep flew across the desert. Klaus drove like a madman. The vehicle bounced over rocks that would have destroyed the Kubelwagen's suspension. It powered through sand that would have trapped their German vehicle. The 4-wheel drive clawed at the earth with mechanical fury that a shell landed directly behind them. The explosion lifted the rear of the Jeep momentarily. Klaus fought the steering wheel. The Jeep came down hard, but kept moving. The engine never hesitated. The wheels never stopped pulling. "Faster," Werner urged. "They are bracketing us." Klaus knew what that meant. Artillery observers were adjusting their aim. The next shells would be more accurate. They needed to break contact. Needed to escape the kill zone. The depot was still 2 kilometers away that he saw a dry riverbed to the right. Deep enough to hide them. Rough enough that normal vehicles could not traverse it quickly. But the Jeep was not a normal vehicle. Klaus turned hard right. The Jeep tilted onto 2 wheels momentarily before crashing back down. He drove straight into the wadi. Rocks scraped the undercarriage. The suspension screamed in protest. But they dropped below ground level. Below the line of sight. Below where the artillery observers could see them point. 3 more shells exploded on the desert floor above them. Too high. Missing their target. Klaus followed the wadi, weaving between boulders, splashing through a thin trickle of water that somehow survived in this wasteland. The Jeep never slowed. Never stopped. It simply kept going. After 10 minutes of brutal driving, they emerged from the wadi near their depot. Klaus could see German soldiers running to defensive positions. Officers shouting orders. The entire camp preparing for possible ground attack following the artillery. Klaus drove straight to their repair tent. He shut off the engine. For a long moment, all 4 mechanics simply sat there, breathing hard, hearts pounding, alive because of an American vehicle they had mocked just days before. Otto was the first to speak. "The Kubelwagen would have gotten stuck in that wadi. We would be dead." Franz nodded, still too shaken to form words. Werner looked at Klaus. "We abandoned our German vehicle to save ourselves with an American one." The weight of that statement settled over them like the desert dust. Klaus climbed out of the Jeep on trembling legs. He walked around the vehicle slowly. Bullet holes from its capture. Dents from their testing. Scrapes from their escape. Still, it had saved them. How many of these did the Americans build? Franz asked quietly. Klaus remembered the intelligence reports. 640,000. Maybe more. By the time the war ends, maybe even more than that. 640,000. Werner repeated slowly. "And we have what? A few thousand Kubelwagens? Maybe 5,000. Otto was staring at the Jeep with something like wonder in his old eyes. "It is not about building a better vehicle. It is about building enough vehicles. Good enough vehicles. Vehicles that soldiers can fix. Vehicles that keep running. Klaus felt everything click into place. The simplicity was not laziness. It was genius. The crude design was not inferior. It was practical. The Americans had not tried to build the perfect military vehicle. They had built a vehicle that could be manufactured by the millions, repaired by anyone, used for everything. Our Panzer tanks are better than their Sherman tanks, Franz said, as if reading Klaus's thoughts. Everyone knows this. How many Panthers do we have? Otto asked. A few hundred? Maybe 1,000? How many Shermans do the Americans have? 20,000? 30,000? What happens when one perfect German tank faces 10 good American tanks? The mathematics of total war. Klaus had never considered it before. Germany focused on quality, on engineering excellence, on building machines that worked perfectly in ideal conditions. America focused on quantity, on practical design, on building machines that worked adequately in any conditions. And they could build them faster, cheaper, in numbers that Germany could never match. That night, after the British artillery stopped and the camp returned to nervous normalcy, the four mechanics sat around the jeep. Klaus had paper and pen. He was writing his report to headquarters. The report they had been ordered to prepare that he wrote honestly. About the simple design. About the standardized parts. About the durability and reliability. About how four-wheel drive conquered terrain that stopped German vehicles. About how any soldier could repair it with basic tools. About how American factories were producing them in numbers Germany could not imagine. Will they listen? Werner asked. Klaus looked up from his writing. No. They will say I am defeatist. They will say I lack faith in German superiority. They will file this report and ignore it. Then why write it? Because it is true. Klaus returned to his writing. And because someone should have written this truth 2 years ago, before we were already losing. Franz leaned against the jeep. We are losing because of this. Because of a simple car. Not just this, Otto said. This represents American thinking. While we perfected our weapons, they produced adequate weapons in overwhelming numbers. While we trained specialized mechanics, they taught every soldier basic repairs. While we designed for victory, they designed for survival. Klaus finished his report as dawn approached. He read it over once. Then again. Every word was accurate. Every observation was supported by their testing. It was perhaps the most important document he would ever write. And he knew it would change nothing to in his final paragraph. He wrote, the American Jeep is not superior because it is better engineered. It is superior because it is better conceived. We have spent this war building masterpieces. They have spent it building practicality. History will judge which strategy was wiser. 3 weeks later, he received a response from headquarters. For words, your report is rejected. Spring 1946. Bavaria, Germany. Klaus swept the floor of his small repair shop in a village outside Munich. The war had ended a year ago. Germany lay in ruins. The mighty Third Reich had crumbled. The 1,000-year empire had lasted only 12 years. Klaus had survived, though many had not. Werner was alive, working in Hanover. Franz had gone to America somehow, to study engineering. Otto had died in the final months, killed by Russian artillery near Berlin. The bell above the door chimed. Klaus looked up from his sweeping. An American officer entered, wearing the uniform of the occupation forces. He was young, maybe 25, with an easy smile that seemed strange to Klaus. German officers had rarely smiled. You are the mechanic? The American asked in broken German. Yes, Klaus replied in better English. He had learned some during his years as a prisoner of war after North Africa. How can I help you? My Jeep needs repair. The carburetor is flooding. Can you fix it? Klaus felt his heart skip. You have a Jeep? Outside. You know them? Klaus set down his broom. Yes, I know them. He followed the American outside. There it sat. A Willis Jeep. Olive drab paint. White star on the hood. Exactly like the one he had studied in the desert 4 years ago. For years that felt like 40. Klaus ran his hand over the flat hood. Feeling memories flood back, the American watched him curiously. You seem familiar with this vehicle. I studied one during the war. Klaus said carefully. In North Africa. I was a mechanic for the Wehrmacht. And now you fix our vehicles. The American's tone was not mocking, just observant. Now I fix any vehicle that needs repair, Klaus replied. The war is over. He opened the hood. The engine was exactly as he remembered. Simple. Accessible. Logical. He could see the carburetor problem immediately. A stuck float valve. 10-minute repair. He retrieved his tools. As he worked, the American officer leaned against the fender. What did you think of them? During the war, Klaus paused, considering his answer. How much truth should he share? But he was tired of lies. Tired of pretending. I thought they were crude at first, Klaus admitted. Simple. Inferior to our German vehicles. I was wrong. Wrong how? Klaus removed the carburetor. We Germans built perfect machines. Precision engineering. Complex systems. Beautiful designs. He cleaned the float valve with solvent. But perfect machines need perfect conditions. Perfect fuel. Perfect maintenance. Perfect parts. War is not perfect. The American nodded slowly. And our Jeeps. Your Jeeps assumed everything would break. Everything would fail. So you designed them to be fixed by anyone, anywhere, with basic tools. Klaus reinstalled the carburetor. We designed for ideal conditions. You designed for reality. That is why you won. I thought we won because we had more men. More resources. Klaus tightened the final bolt. You had more because you thought differently. While we spent months building one perfect tank, you spent the same time building 10 adequate tanks. While we trained specialized mechanics, you taught every soldier basic repairs. While we pursued excellence, you pursued sufficiency. He closed the hood. Sufficiency multiplied by massive numbers defeats excellence every time. The American was quiet for a moment. That is a hard lesson to learn, especially when you learn it too late. Klaus wiped his hands. Try starting it. The Jeep started immediately. The engine ran smooth. The carburetor flooded no more. Klaus had not lost his touch. How much do I owe you? The American asked, reaching for his wallet. Nothing, Klaus said. Consider it payment for a lesson. Your Jeep taught me more than any school. After the American drove away, Klaus returned to his shop. He sat at his workbench, staring at a small model of a Jeep that Franz had sent him from America. Franz was doing well, studying at MIT, learning more about practical engineering, embracing the American philosophy of good enough instead of the German obsession with perfect. A letter had arrived with the model. Klaus read it again now, though he had already memorized the words. Dear Klaus, Franz had written, my professors here teach that engineering is not about making the best thing. It is about making the right thing for the situation. The Jeep was right for war. Simple, tough, reproducible. We Germans were wrong. We thought war was about quality. War is about quantity and adaptability. I am learning to think differently here. I hope you are too. Klaus folded the letter carefully. Through his shop window, he could see German civilians passing by, rebuilding their lives, rebuilding their country. The war had destroyed so much. Cities lay in rubble. Millions had died. Families torn apart. All because Germany had refused to learn, refused to adapt, refused to see that sometimes simple was better than sophisticated. He thought about the report he had written in 1942. The one headquarters rejected. If they had listened then, would it have changed anything? Probably not. The war was already lost by then, though nobody wanted to admit it. Lost not on any battlefield, but in the factories. Lost in the philosophy of design. Lost when American assembly lines began producing adequate weapons faster than Germany could produce perfect ones. His younger apprentice, a 17-year-old named Hans, arrived for his afternoon lessons. Klaus had taken him on to teach him the trade. But Klaus taught more than just mechanics. He taught philosophy. Taught that sometimes the simple solution was the brilliant solution. Taught that perfection was sometimes the enemy of good enough. Today we work on that Volkswagen, Klaus told Hans, pointing to a car in the corner. Notice how simple the design is. Rear engine, air-cooled, basic panels, easy to produce, easy to fix. Like the Jeep you tell me about? Hans asked. Exactly like the Jeep. Klaus smiled slightly. After the war, we are finally learning what the Americans knew all along. Simplicity is not weakness. It is wisdom. That evening, Klaus locked up his shop and walked home through the spring twilight. War had taught him many things. How to fix vehicles under fire. How to survive on little food. How to endure fear and hardship. But the most important lesson came from a simple American vehicle in the North African desert. 640,000 Jeeps had conquered 2 continents. Not through superior engineering. Not through perfect design. But through practical thinking multiplied by massive production. Through vehicles that any soldier could maintain. Through machines designed for the chaos of reality rather than the fantasy of perfection. Klaus had learned that lesson too late to help his country, but not too late to help himself. Not too late to teach a new generation. Not too late to understand that sometimes the greatest engineering achievement is knowing when to keep things simple. The Jeep had won the war. But more importantly, it had taught Klaus Hoffmann how to think differently. And that lesson, learned in fire and blood and desert sand, was worth more than any victory.